Next, on Current News, mask mandates and more. President Joe Biden signs a slew of executive orders in his first full day in the office, promising to beat back a deadly pandemic. But will he protect the rights of the unborn? Word is safeguards could fall by the wayside, and that has Catholic leaders concerned. Then,
it's been a big part of the Queens Catholic community for years, but now St. Agnes Academic High School is shutting down. I'm Emily Drooby, and coming up, you'll hear from students, faculty, and alumni about the decision.
And the community in Kamala Harris's ancestral home in India is celebrating their native daughter's historic achievement. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. President Joe Biden laying out his plan to battle the COVID crisis.
Our national strategy is comprehensive. It's based on science, not politics. It's based on truth, not denial, and it's detailed.
The commander-in-chief held up the nearly 200-page plan. The executive actions include a campaign to vaccinate 100 million in 100 days. However, some independent experts say the administration should be setting a higher bar than that, since during the flu season, the U.S. can vaccinate 3 million a day. He also signed an order to use the Defense Production Act, directing all federal agencies and private industries to produce everything needed to protect Americans from the virus. The president not only using his executive powers to go forward in the fight against the pandemic, but also to reverse policies put into place by the previous administration.
The state of the nation today is no time to waste. Get to work immediately.
And that he did. With a pile of executive orders on his desk, President Joe Biden got to work, signing several on his first day on the job, many targeting former President Trump's policies.
And we're going to combat climate change in a way that we haven't done so far.
Biden canceled the Keystone XL pipeline. The system stretches thousands of miles through several states, carrying crude oil from Canada into the U.S. He also rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement, a deal negotiated when he was vice president. Catholic leaders praised the move and also welcomed the new administration's decision to scrap Trump's travel ban on predominantly Muslim countries. New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan and Bishop Mario Dorsonville, Auxiliary Bishop of Washington, released a statement saying in part it will help ensure that those fleeing persecution and seeking refuge or seeking to reunify with family in the United States will not be turned away because of what country they are from or what religion they practice. As far as the U.S.-Mexico border wall is concerned, President Biden ordered an immediate pause on construction, a serious blow to what Trump called one of his major accomplishments. There's also now a 100-day moratorium on certain deportations. The administration says it's all part of Biden's plans for immigration reform.
What President Biden is doing is restoring humanity and restoring American values to our immigration system.
Biden also wants to restore America's economy. He's extending bans on evictions and foreclosures for Americans affected by the coronavirus pandemic. He also rejoined the World Health Organization, making the fight against coronavirus a top priority for his administration, imposing a mask mandate for those on federal property and launching a 100-day mask challenge.
The issue that he wakes up every day focused on is getting the pandemic under control. The issue he goes to bed every night focused on is getting the pandemic under control.
Biden's aides say he signed more day one executive actions than any of his predecessors, and more policy changes will be coming over the coming weeks. And some of those possible changes have many Catholic leaders concerned, making protections for the rights of the unborn top of mind, specifically when it comes to the Hyde Amendment and the Mexico City policy, safeguards that protect against taxpayer funding for abortions. But in the administration's first press briefing, the new press secretary would not say what the administration plans to do about the current policies.
We'll have more to say on the Mexico City policy in the coming days. But I will just take the opportunity to remind all of you that he is a devout Catholic and somebody who attends church regularly. He started his day attending church with his family this morning, but I don't have anything more for you on that.
President Biden did not disclose any abortion policy changes in his first day in office. A little more context now on both policies. The Hyde Amendment, named after Republican Congressman Henry Hyde, was a law enacted in 1976 in response to the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision. It bars taxpayer money from being used for most abortions and is re-upped every year as a rider to federal spending bills. President Biden has said in the past that he will work to overturn the law. A repeal of the amendment would require both chambers of Congress. The House and the Senate are now in Democrats' control. The Mexico City policy, first announced by President Reagan at a conference on population there in 1984, prohibits non-governmental agencies from using U.S. money, including money from outside the U.S., to perform or provide information about abortion as a method of family planning. It also includes lobbying foreign governments to legalize abortion. The policy had been rescinded and reinstated multiple times. President Trump reinstated it in 2017. New York lawmakers are looking to the new president for some help. A bipartisan pair of assembly members writing to Biden to implore Governor Andrew Cuomo to release the total number of nursing home residents who died from the pandemic. The State Department of Health has recorded roughly 8,400 COVID deaths from long-term care facilities, but the agency has excluded data pertaining to the deaths of residents after they were transferred from the homes into hospitals. An identical request had been sent to the Trump administration weeks ago, but was ignored. As coronavirus hospitalizations continue to rise in New York, Governor Cuomo says the state's supply of vaccines will run dry before next week's shipment arrives from the federal government. Shortages have already forced New York City to reschedule 23,000 appointments, prompting Mayor Bill de Blasio to call on the federal government to trigger the Defense Production Act, something President Biden just did. The ongoing pandemic is also forcing a difficult decision. After over 100 years of serving students in the Diocese of Brooklyn, St. Agnes Academic High School in Queens will be closing. Currents News' Emily DROOBY spoke with members of the St. Agnes family about the decision.
Juniors Rose TROIANO and Emily DIAZ are turning a new page in their life. Their beloved school, St. Agnes in College Point, Queens, has announced its closing at the end of this school year.
It's hard to process everything because I was looking forward to my senior year so much, like we all were.
Principal Susan Nicoletti explains declining enrollment and financial pressure from the pandemic are to blame.
Of course, the pandemic didn't help. There are tuitions that have to be paid and parents who lost their job. And we do serve a community that's needy.
At least 50% of their students need financial aid. Earlier in 2020, alumni stepped up to help, raising $60,000 for tuition costs. The strong support is not surprising to Robin Loesch.
St. Agnes meant the world to me.
She says growing up in foster care, to her, the school was always a family she could count on.
The academics were just wonderful, and I want every young woman to have the experience that my classmates and I had.
Her and many other alumni flocked to social media after the announcement, wishing they could help. But the ongoing financial pressure on both the school and the Sisters of St. Dominic of Amityville, who own and operate the school, was just too much. Now the attention is on helping students like Emily and Rose. Faculty has figured out a way to give juniors a choice between transferring to a new school for their senior year or graduating early, giving students a chance to finish their last 2 required classes during breaks and in June.
I am leaning towards to graduating early. It was a tough choice.
A tough choice, but one Emily was grateful she could make. The school will leave another gap. It's one of only 2 all-girls schools in Queens. School leadership tells us they're doing their best to place both their staff and students at other Catholic schools. Now, St. Agnes is scheduled to officially close their doors in June of this year. In College Point, Queens, Emily DROOBY, Currents News.
There's a lot more news headed your way. First, we head to India, where Kamala Harris's uncle speaks out about the impact the vice president's mother had on her life.
In spite of the discrimination and all those things she personally felt, she brought up her daughter to fight for minorities.
Plus, the Harris family joins the Bidens for a virtual prayer service, a tradition that dates back all the way to the first inauguration. And helping the homeless, the Vatican fulfills a wish by Pope Francis to vaccinate some of those most at risk. All coming up next. Vice President Kamala Harris made history at Wednesday's inauguration. She's an all-American story, a daughter of immigrants who was able to bust through several glass ceilings. And her family in India could not be more proud. Vidika Sood has the story.
The duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
While America witnessed history, the village of Thulasendrapuram in South India, almost 8,700 miles from the White House, better known as Harris's ancestral home where her maternal grandfather was born, broke into celebration as Kamala Harris took her oath as Vice President of the United States. The usual quiet of the night disrupted with celebration and fireworks. For them, Harris is like family.
2000 குடும்பங்கள் தான் இருக்கு துளசேந்திரபுரத்துல. அவங்க அதாவது துளசேந்திரபுரத்தை உலகம் பூரா பார்க்குற அளவுக்கு திரும்பி பார்க்க வச்சிருக்காங்க. அது எங்களுக்கெல்லாம் ரொம்ப பெருமையா இருக்கு.
The build up to the inauguration began early Wednesday morning. In the shadow of the COVID-19 pandemic, people cooked for the special occasion.
இந்த ஊருக்கு வந்தாங்கன்னா இன்னும் எங்களுக்கு ரொம்ப மகிழ்ச்சியா இருக்கும், ரொம்ப பெருமையா இருக்கும். எங்க ஊரை அவங்க ஒரு தடவையாவது பார்க்கணும்.
Decorated their courtyards and held prayers at the village temple Harris's extended family members have attended.
I heard that she as a 5-year-old child she used to come. She has come to this temple with her grandfather.
In Delhi, Harris's uncle, whom she fondly calls Uncle Balu, was flooded with congratulatory messages and calls.
Well, last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, there was no calls. But yesterday and today, I'm getting a lot of calls.
Harris often credits her mother, Shamla, as one of the most important influences in her life.
To the woman most responsible for my presence here today, my mother, Shamla Gopalan Harris, who is always in our hearts.
Shamla was all of 19 when she moved to California from India to pursue her studies. An active civil rights crusader, she later raised her 2 daughters amid many adversities.
So in spite of the discrimination and all those things they felt, she personally felt, she brought up her daughter to fight for the minorities and everything. So normally when I see Kamala, I feel more and more I think about it. The more and more I feel what a damn good job Shamla did, you know.
Vidika Sood, New Delhi.
The Vice President, along with President Joe Biden, spent part of her first full day in office in prayer. The two taking part in the inaugural National Prayer Service from within the White House. The service, normally held at the Washington National Cathedral, was virtual because of the pandemic. The interfaith tradition dates back to the first inauguration of President George Washington. Eagle-eyed Catholics noticed a familiar face among Biden's pictures in the Oval Office. Behind the resolute desk, President Biden has a picture of himself meeting with Pope Francis on display. The now president met the Pope on several occasions while serving as VP. Biden attended Francis's inauguration as Pope in 2013. When the Holy Father visited the U.S. in 2015, the two had a private meeting. And in 2016, the Pope met with Biden when he spoke at the Vatican about regenerative medicine. The Vatican has finally fulfilled a Christmas wish by Pope Francis. The Holy See has started vaccinating the city's homeless population. Christian Campos reports on the effort to curb the virus among the city's most vulnerable.
About 25 homeless people have received the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine at the Vatican. It was in Paul VI Hall, where Vatican employees, starting with the Swiss Guard, were also vaccinated. Polish Cardinal Konrad Kujewski, the papal almoner, was in charge of organizing the procedure.
Allora, bravissimo. Aspetta,
This was the first group of homeless people to receive the vaccine. The Vatican explained that others will be coming to this makeshift hospital in the next few days to be vaccinated. This fulfills the Pope's Christmas request.
Prego a tutti i responsabili degli Stati, imprese, organismi internazionali, di promuovere la cooperazione e non la concorrenza e di cercare una soluzione per tutti, vaccini per tutti, specialmente per i più vulnerabili e bisognosi di tutte le regioni del pianeta.
Throughout the pandemic, the Pope has often called not to abandon people with less resources to fight the coronavirus.
That was Christian Campos reporting. The Vatican later clarified the homeless who received the vaccine were those who received shelter and assistance from various church-run facilities close to the Vatican. The Pope is praying for the victims of a deadly explosion in Spain. Firefighters on the scene Wednesday after a building housing a parish rectory exploded in Madrid. At least 4 people are dead, several others injured. One of the dead, a recently ordained Catholic priest. Repairs were apparently being made on a boiler when the blast occurred. Turning now to the Fight for Life set to take place in the following week. The Diocese of Brooklyn normally sends dozens of young people to the March for Life every year, but this year the march is virtual. The Bishop of Brooklyn, Nicholas DiMarzio, sits down with Tablet editor emeritus Ed Wilkinson to talk about the importance of the yearly march in this week's Into the Deep. Ed.
Thank you. Bishop DiMarzio is with us today to talk to us about the annual March for Life. And do you think the March for Life has made a difference over the years? I mean, the country does seem to have been more or less enlightened about the sin of abortion. Do you think that the March of Life has had a good effect on the country?
It certainly has not hurt. Let's put it that way. How much good it's done, how much enlightenment has come from it, it's hard to judge. Public opinion is shifting in the direction of restricting unlimited abortions, though, and that's across the board, Catholics and non-Catholics. So I think something has happened, especially with our young people. They see it a little bit differently than it was in the past. So.
Yeah, a little different this year because the presidency has changed, and we have a Democrat in the White House who is also a Catholic. And that presents a bit of a problem because he seems to be a very pro-abortion, takes a very pro-abortion approach. Is that a problem for us as a church and for the bishops in the United States?
Well, certainly it doesn't make our relationship with the president easier because, again, it's one thing to say that I must enforce the law as president. It's another thing to actually be pro-abortion and try to extend the abortion. It's an unfortunate misunderstanding I think people have of what real life begins.
Yeah.
And until we get to that point where people will be convinced life begins at conception, it's very difficult to convince them that any law that is a so-called freedom of choice for women, any restriction in that will be impossible unless we recognize life takes precedence over any choice.
Yeah. The bishops have formed an ad hoc committee on how to deal with a Catholic president with whom they are in opposition on certain issues. How is that committee going to work? Is that clear yet?
No, it's not. I mean, they did put groups together that the public policy committees, I think the chairman put together to see how our approach will work. You know, we've had this in the past and we've been able to accommodate and try to figure out how we can agree on things and then disagree when necessary. So it will be, and we also disagree with the Trump administration on many things also. So it's nothing new. We're never going to get the perfect fit for what our agenda, which is very vast.
Okay, Bishop, thanks so much for being with us today. And now we're going to throw this back to the news desk.
Thanks, Ed. So people wishing to participate in this year's March for Life will have to do so virtually. If you'd like to join in the virtual fight for the unborn, just head over to marchforlife.org/2021 virtual events. There you can RSVP to the event and have a link to the live stream sent right to your mailbox. Again, that's marchforlife.org/2021 virtual events. Still to come on Currents News, a young poet is making headlines all over the world after the inauguration, but one of her biggest fans is close to home. We'll hear from her overjoyed grandma coming up. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. One of the highlights of Joe Biden's inauguration was an inspirational reading by the nation's youth poet laureate, Amanda Gorman. It was also a very proud moment for Amanda's grandmother back in Sacramento. Brandy Cummings has the story.
We are striving to forge our union with purpose.
The world watched. No one more proud than this woman who watched from her Sacramento home. You see, 22-year-old Amanda Gorman is Bertha Gorman's granddaughter. Bertha says she's not surprised that her granddaughter was given this special honor. The young woman has a long list of accomplishments. She's a Harvard graduate and published author. It was during Amanda's performance at the Library of Congress that First Lady Jill Biden saw her and made sure the young poet would be part of the presidential inauguration.
This is her twin sister, and this is her cousin.
A grandmother's love spans the distance. While Amanda gains international fame, Bertha proudly shows off the old pictures of Amanda, her twin sister, and cousins. But the incredible moment for the family is not lost on her, a woman who grew up in the segregated South.
This day is very impactful because it's so historic. I mean, to be with the first Black woman of color who has been elected as the Vice President of the United States. I mean, that is historic. And for her to be a part of that is beyond fantastic.
As for what's next, Bertha says Amanda plans to run for president, something she's not shy about revealing.
We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one.
That was Brandy Cummings reporting. Amanda Gorman joins a small group of famous poets who have participated in past presidential inaugurations. Wednesday, she joined legends like Robert Frost and Maya Angelou. Before we go, we want to remind you that you can participate in the Diocese of Brooklyn's opening mass for the USCCB's 9 Days for Life. It's about to begin at 7:30, right after this newscast, live from St. Joseph's Co-Cathedral. That is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.